There's this story in John chapter 5 of a lame man who has been sitting by the side of a pool. This pool is called in Aramaic the house of loving kindness. Tradition tells us that every so often an angel of God would come down and stir up the waters. And then the first one who stepped into the pool after the waters had been stirred would be healed. Interesting, isn't it? We're told that hundreds of people were gathered around this pool and they were just waiting. The man we're talking about in particular had been waiting there for decades. And what was it they were waiting for? In their minds, changing their situation didn't depend on them. It depended on something that was external to them. Just as soon as the thing outside of their control was stirred up, then their lives can be different. Now they think, I can finally get my life in order. It's easy to fall into this pattern of thought that if God would just change the way that person talks to me or the way things are happening at work, if only God would change my spouse or would do a great work in the lives of my kids, then my life would be different. Then I'll make a change. And we don't only think about this in relation to God either. Many times we get caught up waiting for someone in our world to make a difference, to make the first step before we move. Just as soon as that person apologizes to me, then my life will be better. Just as soon as my boss starts treating me better, then I'll produce better work. It's easy to come to the same place that we've always been and expect that place to be stirred up, to expect somebody else to change. We see how difficult it can be to change a mindset from the short exchange Jesus has with our friend, this lame man by the side of the pool. When Jesus asks him if he wants to be healed, you'd think his response would be immediate. Of course, I would love to be able to walk. But instead, he blames his current situation on the environment he is in and the people around him. He says, people keep getting ahead of me. It's their fault I'm not changing. Change isn't his responsibility. It's someone else's. Sound familiar? Take a look again at how Jesus approaches the man in verse 6. When Jesus saw him lying there, he knew that the man had been crippled for a long time. So Jesus said to him, do you truly long to be healed? Our friend by the pool had become so used to his situation that simply by seeing him, Jesus knew that he had been in that state for some time. The Bibles that you and I read have been translated into English, and so they miss some of the subtleties that are there in the original text. The way that Jesus phrased the question pointed the man to the fact that God had already made possible for him to walk in all that he had for him. He was asking the man if he was ready to abandon the way he had been looking at himself and begin looking at himself as the person that God had created. In other words, is he ready to stop waiting for the waters to be stirred up? And is he willing to be stirred up from within? This man had seen himself a particular way for 38 years. And in one moment, Jesus gave him the opportunity to look at himself differently. Every time God's word comes to us, we are given the opportunity to see our situation differently. Regardless of how long we've been in the same situation, making the same excuses, listening to the same people that get us nowhere, Jesus continues to ask us, are we ready to abandon the way we've been thinking about ourselves and begin to see ourselves the way that God does? Are we ready to discover the plan God had for us before the foundation of the world and walk that out? Dreams don't expire. Our friend by the pool knew his entire life that he should be walking, that he should be running. I would imagine that just because he was older, his desire to walk didn't lessen. Perhaps his hope of being able to walk was waning, but never the understanding that he was meant to experience more in this life. What dreams do you have that have been put on hold because of a situation or a person or a mindset? Have you been waiting for God to stir up someone or something else before you move? It takes one moment to believe what God says about you, ignoring the claims your past is trying to make on you. And each moment we take is another step into all God has for us. Your life is far greater than you can imagine. Ephesians 3:20 tells us that God is able to do far more than we would ever dare to ask or even dream of, infinitely beyond our highest prayers, desires, thoughts, or hopes. Not only is God able to, He actively wants to. Choose to accept what He says about you, to be stirred up from within. Multiply the moments you choose to believe God's word over and above what you can see. Make that phone call. Apply for that job. Go back to school. Mend the relationship. Get involved in church. Had our friend chosen to ignore Jesus, he would have spent the rest of his life wondering what could have been. Don't spend your life wondering. This is your moment.